And yet, the world keeps spinning while you burn yourself out to keep up. You call it responsibility. You call it discipline. But the truth is, you're afraid. Afraid that if you stop, even for a moment, the illusion of your worth will collapse. But Marcus Aurelius reminds us, the soul becomes dyed with the color of its thoughts. If those thoughts are soaked in guilt for simply pausing, what color do you imagine your soul has become? There's another quiet sign, almost invisible. You seek validation for every decision you make. Before you move, you look around. Before you speak, you calculate who might disapprove. You've built your life like a courtroom, waiting for others to approve your every move. But Stoicism teaches us that virtue is its own reward. The moment you start living for applause, you lose the sound of your own inner voice. Have you ever found yourself saying, "I'm just not good enough"? Not out loud, but in the subtle way you accept less. Less respect. Less attention. Less opportunity. You allow others to shine while you fade into the background, pretending that your silence is humility. It's not. It's self-abandonment. And the Stoics warned us of this most dangerous habit, forgetting that you are already complete, already whole, lacking nothing but belief. You spend hours comparing yourself, to strangers, to friends, to shadows of people online. You scroll and sink. Scroll and shrink. And all the while, your value remains untouched, yet unseen. Epictetus would ask, "Why are you concerned with the opinions of those who are not your judge?" The world does not decide your worth. But every time you compare, you hand it that power willingly. Another subtle betrayal. You ignore your own needs to keep others comfortable. You smile when you're tired. You give when your cup is empty. You laugh when your spirit is quiet. This is not strength. This is slow self-erasure. The Stoics believed in service, yes, but not at the cost of your own center. To give from depletion is not noble, it is neglect, of yourself and eventually, of others. Perhaps the most telling sign is the way you tolerate disrespect. Not from enemies, but from those closest to you. You justify their behavior. You tell yourself, "They didn't mean it," or "Maybe I'm too sensitive." But in doing so, you chip away at your own boundaries. Stoicism is not passivity, it is principled action. And if you don't draw the line, someone else will gladly cross it. Finally, and most quietly, you have dreams, visions, silent desires. But you delay them. Postpone them. Tell yourself you're not ready. That the time isn't right. That maybe, someday, but not now. And that is how most people die, with their potential still locked inside. But the Stoics lived as if each day were their last, because one of them always would be. They didn't wait to become who they were meant to be. And neither should you. So ask yourself, not just once, but every day, am I treating myself as someone worthy of this breath? Of this time? Of this life? Because Stoicism doesn't ask you to become someone else. It asks you to return to what you were always meant to be. Undistracted. Unafraid. Unshakable in worth. You are not small. You are simply not seeing clearly. And now, the lens is in your hands. Let the truth of who you are rise, quietly, powerfully, undeniably. And once you begin to see, truly see, the silent ways you've been standing in your own shadow, something shifts. Not with noise, not with grand gestures, but with a quiet rebellion inside you. The rebellion of the soul remembering its value. You start choosing differently. Not because the world has changed, but because your posture in it has. You speak with a tone that doesn't seek permission. You move with a calm certainty that doesn't need applause. You no longer rush to fill silences with nervous explanations. You let the silence speak for itself, and in it, your presence deepens. You walk away from conversations that drain you, not with bitterness, but with grace. You understand now, Not everyone is meant to recognize your worth. And that's not your failure. It's their blindness. The Stoics didn't teach us to please the world. They taught us to be immovable within it. Even your goals begin to change. You no longer chase validation or clout. You pursue what's meaningful, what aligns with your values, your essence. You stop outsourcing your self-worth to titles, followers, income, or fleeting praise. You return to a simpler truth. Am I living according to nature? Am I living with virtue? And then something beautiful happens. People begin to treat you differently. Not because they've changed, but because you have. When you carry yourself with quiet dignity, others feel it. When you set boundaries, others respect them, or reveal that they never respected you to begin with. And in both cases, you win. You begin to attract what matches your frequency. Opportunities that once passed you by now find their way to you, not because you begged for them, but because you finally believed you deserved them. This is not arrogance. This is alignment. And the fear that once paralyzed you, of being rejected, misunderstood, unseen, begins to dissolve. Because now you understand the most powerful truth the Stoics left behind. That your worth does not come from being chosen by others. It comes from choosing yourself. Again. And again. Without hesitation. And that choice, quiet as it may seem, will change the direction of your entire life. You begin to wake up differently. The morning no longer feels like a battlefield before the day even starts. There's a calm in the way you rise. A steadiness in how you move through your rituals. Brushing your teeth, making your bed, stepping into the day, these are no longer acts of obligation, but declarations. Quiet affirmations that you are here, you matter, and you are worthy of care, even in the smallest details. The conversations you once avoided, you now meet with clarity. You speak not to dominate, not to prove, but to be understood. And when you're not, you no longer crumble. You simply take a breath and move on. You've come to realize that the storm in someone else's voice doesn't require a storm in yours. That someone else's chaos is not your invitation to abandon your peace. Even in the workplace, you stand differently. You no longer shrink when your ideas are challenged. You no longer nod along when your instincts scream otherwise. There is a quiet power in no longer needing to be the loudest voice in the room, and yet your presence fills it. Not because you demand respect, but because you finally reflect it, inward first, then outward. And in your solitude, there's no longer a gnawing sense of inadequacy. The silence that used to feel like punishment now feels like return. You sit with yourself, and it doesn't feel lonely. It feels whole. Because finally, you are no longer running from your reflection. You've made peace with it. You've remembered who you are, beneath the noise, beyond the roles, behind the armor. In your relationships, you no longer beg for breadcrumbs of affection. You no longer overextend just to keep the peace. Love is no longer a negotiation of your dignity. You love cleanly, without attachment to outcomes, without fear of loss, because your foundation is not built on need, but on abundance. If they stay, good. If they leave, better. You've stopped making your worth conditional on anyone else's presence. Even your failures are different now. They no longer shatter you. They refine you. You study them like a Stoic would, not with shame, but with curiosity. What did I miss? What did this teach me? You fall, yes, but each time you rise faster, cleaner, quieter. There is no spectacle in your growth, only strength. And with time, your very existence becomes a message. Without preaching, without forcing, without chasing, you become the living embodiment of what it means to know your worth. A person of still waters and deep roots. Unmoved by praise. Untouched by ridicule. Unafraid of solitude. A Stoic in the truest sense. Not because you quote Marcus or Seneca, but because you've learned the rarest wisdom of all, that nothing is more powerful than a soul that no longer needs to be rescued. And as this transformation takes root, you begin to see time differently. Where once you raced against the hours, now you walk with them. You no longer treat your life as a series of deadlines to be met, but as moments to be inhabited. Fully. Deliberately. The future doesn't haunt you the way it used to. And the past? It no longer drags behind you like a chain. You've made peace with both, because you've finally anchored yourself in the only place that was ever real. Now. You no longer ask, "What should I be doing?" You begin to ask, "Who am I becoming?" That question guides your decisions, your routines, the way you spend your energy, the way you say yes, and more importantly, the way you say no. There's a sharpened discernment in you now, not rooted in judgment, but in self-respect. You stop entertaining shallow distractions. You stop explaining yourself to those committed to misunderstanding you. You stop watering dead plants, people, habits, patterns, that once had a grip on your life simply because you were afraid to let go. And it shows, not just in your speech or your posture, but in your presence. When you enter a room, you no longer seek to be noticed, and yet people feel it. That strange, magnetic stillness that radiates from someone who is no longer trying to prove anything. You've stopped performing. You've stopped auditioning for a life that was never meant to be a performance. You live now from the inside out, guided by inner principle, not outer pressure. And slowly, you find yourself aligning with your deeper purpose. Not a title, not a role, but the quiet truth that's been whispering to you for years, waiting for you to become still enough to hear it. You begin to create, not to impress, but to express. You begin to serve, not to be needed, but because it's who you are. You begin to lead, not from ego, but from example. You become the kind of person who no longer reacts to life like a victim of it, but responds to it as a steward of your time, your energy, your soul. And this shift ripples. Others feel it. Some will be drawn to it. Others, threatened by it. You'll lose people, opportunities, familiar comforts. But none of it will shake you, because for the first time in your life, you are rooted, not in external success, not in fleeting pleasure, but in something far more rare, inner congruence. You are who you say you are. You live how you speak. You walk what you know. And as this internal harmony deepens, a new understanding begins to surface, one that stretches far beyond personal peace. You begin to think about your place in the world not as a momentary flicker, but as part of a much longer thread, a continuum. You begin to ask yourself, what will I leave behind? Not in things, but in people, in moments, in memory. The Stoics did not speak of legacy in the way modern culture does. Not as fame, nor fortune, nor glory carved into stone. No, they believed in the legacy of character. The quiet mark left by a life well lived, governed by reason, justice, courage, and temperance. A life that leaves the world a fraction more awake, more truthful, more aligned, simply because you walk through it with presence. And now you feel this, not as a pressure, but as a calling. You start to notice the small ways your presence affects others. The stranger you smiled at who walked away a little lighter. The friend who spoke their truth because you created the safety to be heard. The child who watched how you stayed calm under pressure and learned, without words, what strength really looks like. These moments are not loud. They will not trend. But they accumulate. Like soft rain on stone, they shape the world quietly, faithfully. And this is what you begin to value. Not the spotlight, but the ripple. You understand now that the most powerful force in the world is not control, nor recognition. It's alignment. When your thoughts, your words, and your actions form a single, unbroken thread, others feel it. Not because you impose it, but because you embody it. And in doing so, you become a mirror. You reflect back to others what they've forgotten in themselves, their dignity, their strength, their clarity. Not by telling them who to be, but by becoming the clearest version of yourself. That is the Stoic way. That is how true influence is built, not by force, but by example. And slowly, without effort, you begin to attract people who value truth over image, depth over noise, stillness over spectacle. Your life begins to fill with meaning, not because you chase it, but because you live in such a way that meaning naturally arises. Even your pain takes on a different texture. You no longer ask, "Why me?" but rather, "What now? What lesson, what refinement, what fire must I walk through to become who I must become?" You stop fearing discomfort because you've seen what lies beyond it: clarity, resilience, self-respect. In this way, you become unstoppable, not because you are immune to failure or untouched by loss, but because you no longer let them define you. You move through life like a mountain in a storm, still, grounded, resolute. Because now you know, the only thing that can truly shake you is the lie that you are not enough. And that lie? You've buried it. Quietly. Permanently. You are no longer at war with yourself. And so, with that lie buried, you begin to see even suffering through a different lens. Not as punishment, but as refinement. Not as a sign that life is against you, but that life is shaping you, teaching you, carving away all that is false, until only what is essential remains. The Stoics never promised a painless life. They never sought to eliminate suffering. They sought to transcend it, to understand it, to meet it eye to eye, without flinching. You begin to do the same. When hardship comes, and it will, you no longer resist. You allow it. You breathe into it. You ask, "What is this moment asking of me?" And more often than not, the answer is silence. Patience. Presence. Strength without spectacle. And in that stillness, something you no longer love out of need, or to be completed, or to fill some aching void. You love from fullness. You love not because someone gives you value, but because you've already found value within. That love is cleaner, freer, less tangled in control or fear. You no longer cling to people. You bless them. Whether they stay or go, whether they understand you or not, whether they rise to meet you or fall away, you remain whole. Because love, to the Stoic, is not possession. It's reverence. It's recognition. And above all, it's letting go when clinging would violate your own peace. And what of impermanence? Of loss? You no longer run from it. In fact, you begin to see its strange beauty. The truth that everything you touch, everyone you meet, every breath you take, is a gift, not a guarantee. This awareness doesn't make you bitter. It makes you tender. It makes you grateful. It makes you fierce in the way you show up, knowing that everything, even this moment, is already slipping away. You practice memento mori, remembering death, not to fall into despair, but to awaken fully to life. You understand now that what makes something precious is its impermanence. And so you live, not recklessly, but with reverence. You slow down. You listen deeper. You say what needs to be said, not someday, but now. You forgive more easily, not because others deserve it, but because your soul does. You begin to cherish the ordinary, the sunlight on your hands, the laughter of a friend, the quiet breath at the end of a long day. And in all of this, you become something rare. Not perfect, not untouchable, but real, rooted, free. You are no longer the person the world shaped. You are the person who shaped themselves. And now, finally, life no longer happens to you. It moves through you. And every step you take is yours. Not from a podium. Not through instruction. but through example, through how you carry yourself in the face of life's chaos, through how you listen without needing to fix, how you speak without needing to impress, how you walk away without needing to explain. People begin to notice, though they may not know exactly what they're noticing. It's something in your eyes, in your restraint, in your calm. They feel safer around you, though you haven't promised them anything. They open up, not because you ask them to, but because your presence gives them permission to put their armor down, to breathe. You've become the rare kind of person who makes others want to become more themselves. This is the final turn of the Stoic path, not just self-mastery, but silent leadership. You no longer need to preach, because your life speaks louder than words ever could, and those who are ready will follow, not because you told them to, but because you showed them it was possible. And what do you teach, exactly? Not doctrines, not dogma, but presence, responsibility, inner freedom. You teach others, without teaching, that life does not have to be an endless reaction, that there is another way to be, with clarity, with boundaries, with grace. You teach, simply by being someone who no longer needs to be anything other than who they are. You become the still point in the turning world. A lighthouse, not chasing ships, but standing firm, casting light for those ready to come home. And in this quiet role, you experience a peace far greater than comfort or ease. It's the peace of integrity, the deep exhale of a life that no longer betrays itself, a life where your inner and outer worlds are finally in agreement. You know hardship will come again, loss, fear, doubt, but you do not dread it, because you've learned to welcome the fire, not to destroy you, but to reveal you, over and over again. And so, you continue walking, not towards some finish line, but into deeper alignment with your own soul, with nature, with truth. No applause, no audience, just the soft, steady rhythm of a life well lived. A Stoic life, not loud, not famous, but unforgettable to those who see it, not as a destination, but as a daily choice, a return, a remembering. Each morning, you rise and meet yourself, not the version the world wants, but the one you've cultivated in silence. You feel the weight of responsibility, not as a burden, but as a sacred duty, to carry yourself with dignity, to respond instead of react, to bring stillness into noise and light into fog. The world remains chaotic, unpredictable. People will still misunderstand you. Some will walk away. Opportunities may fall through. Plans may unravel. But none of it will define you. Because you've learned, the external world can shake your circumstances, but it can never shake your center, unless you let it. And you don't. Not anymore. Your values have become your compass. You no longer drift. You direct. Even in uncertainty, you move with intention. Not every answer is clear, but your direction always is, toward what is right, what is just, what is in accordance with your highest nature. And though the crowd may run, you remain still. Though the noise may rise, you remain quiet. Though the path may narrow, you remain unwavering. Because you understand now, peace is not found at the end of some distant accomplishment. It is not in control, or applause, or arrival. Peace lives here, in this breath, in this act, in this choice to align with what you know is true, even if no one else sees it. And in this way, your life becomes your message. Not flashy, not grandiose, but grounded, real, felt. You leave behind not just memories, but echoes, of presence, of principle, of someone who didn't need to be loud to be strong, who didn't need to dominate to lead, who didn't need to be seen to have impact. Your very existence becomes a kind of quiet rebellion against everything that is shallow, frantic, and false. And in time, others will begin to ask, not what you did, but how you did it. how you walked through loss without losing yourself, how you held peace when chaos swirled, how you loved without attachment, how you let go without bitterness, how you carried your life like something sacred. And when they ask, you won't have to say much, because the answer will already be written, in the way you live, in the way you move, in the space you leave behind when you're gone. That is the legacy of a person who no longer undervalues themselves. That is the mark of a soul that came home to its worth and never looked back. And so, the journey carries on, not as a straight line, but as a spiral. Seasons change. You grow older. The body softens, slows. The people around you shift. Some leave. Some pass. Some grow in ways that no longer match your own. But the essence within you only sharpens, clarifies, deepens. With time, your relationship with solitude transforms. What once felt like absence now feels like presence in its purest form. You sit with yourself not to escape the world, but to listen more closely to it. The longer you walk this path, the more you realize, most answers don't come from others. They rise from within, but only in silence, and only to those who are ready to receive them. You no longer chase legacy in the way youth sometimes does. You realize the true legacy isn't built in monuments or memory. It's built in moments, in how deeply you listen, in how honestly you love, in how gracefully you let go. It's the kind of legacy that doesn't always carry your name,